Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of We Should Talk, a pop culture series from In the Know. I'm your host, Gibson Johns, and I don't know if you can hear that in the background. It's not actually playing, but that's Evermore on repeat, y'all. Like, in the past week since our last episode came out, Taylor Swift has really thrown us for a loop, okay? Like, she announced right after our interview came out with Wendy that she was releasing another surprise album at midnight on Thursday. And since then, since I listened to it at midnight when it came out, yes, that is how dedicated I am to Taylor Allison Swift. I've had it on repeat, and yes, I love it just as much as everyone else. I still love Folklore, and I just don't know what we did to deserve this woman. Like, she has had the most productive quarantine out of anybody that I know, other than maybe like Dr. Fauci. Like, this woman is like really giving it all, and she is really channeling sort of like her feelings from this year into amazing, amazing music. And as somebody who has been a fan of Taylor Swift since her first album. And I don't say that to sort of like brag and be like, oh my God, like I've been there since the beginning. Like, no, that's not my point. My point is that like I'm very invested in Taylor, and almost to the point where like I'm too close to the sun, meaning that like I don't know if I can like aptly critique her because I like kind of just take everything that she gives us and like love it like kind of instantaneously. But it has been interesting to sort of watch the dialogue around Taylor changed totally over the years. And she went from like sort of like the savant country singer-songwriter, she jumped into the pop world and more people took notice of her, and then 1989 era just sort of like blew her totally up. Like, Blank Space in particular, I think, was really instrumental in kind of getting like that last cohort of like the mainstream and to sort of take note of her and be like, oh my God, like Taylor's like epic. Like even that music video and her showing that she can do that kind of like show that kind of side to her. But then the 1989 era also like totally overexposed Taylor and sort of backfired eventually on her. She was kind of accused of being, kind of ingenuine and too calculated. And then the Kimye Snapchat debacle sort of like totally hit her public image, and she sort of hid from the public for a while. And then some of that became backlash because people were on the Kimye side of things, when in actuality, Taylor was telling the truth the whole time. Thank you very much. But then she sort of came back with Reputation. She refused to do any interviews. She released music that was very kind of experimental for her. Like, it kind of like had some hip hop elements in there, and she was experimenting with different genres. And a lot of people like sort of didn't love that album. I love Reputation. It's actually one of my favorite Taylor Swift albums. And then post Reputation, she sort of opened herself back up, right? With Lover, she kind of went back to her roots. She was doing more interviews, and people sort of like came back around to her. But it really was Folklore and now Evermore that sort of like really made critics and sort of like another element of the mainstream really kind of take notice of her. People who took music really, really seriously were suddenly taking Taylor Swift seriously, even though she's been an amazing songwriter and singer the whole time. And it's so interesting to me because, I mean, again, this is to take nothing from what Folklore and Evermore are, but it's so interesting that she linked up with Aaron from The National and Bon Iver, and then all of a sudden, all of these like white male music critics and white male people who take music so seriously, and just people who like kind of like dismissed her for a decade, finally were like, oh, like Taylor, like now that she's like sort of like releasing alternative quote unquote music, people are sort of like coming around to her. And it's just a very interesting thing to watch, sort of like as somebody who's very entrenched in like the Swiftie world. And yes, that's a way I would describe myself, as somebody who is entrenched in the Swiftie world. Oh my God, I need to like be stopped. Anyway, like that's just something that I've been thinking about sort of as I've seen the dialogue around Folklore and Evermore, and all these publications have rushed to push both albums to like the top of their, best of the year lists and all those things. And, I hope that, as Taylor continues to release music in the coming years, and she probably goes back to like releasing more like bop-worthy songs, that people continue to take her seriously and continue to recognize her genius songwriting and songcrafting skills, because that is really what she excels at. And it doesn't need to be in like a folk, alternative, rocky kind of lens for that to be taken seriously, and for that to really like stay true. But yeah, that's sort of my Taylor spiel. I've been thinking a lot about that recently. But this week on the podcast, we have two amazing guests. We have Emma Diamond and Julie Kramer, and they are the co-founders of Comments by Celebs. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are you already follow Comments by Celebs. You're already very familiar with their brand. If you are interested in celebrity or entertainment or pop culture or what is going on in Hollywood, Comments by Celebs is one of the most must-follow accounts on social media. I think, they are amazing curators of celebrity news, and they do it so quickly. And I've known Emma and Julie for a while because I started following them really early on. My brother Bo sent me their Instagram account before they were even at 10K followers back in 2017. And they struck up a relationship with me. They struck up a relationship with a lot of entertainment reporters and writers to, flag certain newsworthy comments or interactions on social media so that we would write about them, embed their posts in the article, and that would sort of be how they were exposed to new audiences. It was an incredibly smart strategy. And since then, we've just sort of had this like rapport, and I met them at a WeWork event. I think it was last year. They did an interview, like one of their very few public-facing interviews. And we met, and it was just a really fun full circle moment. And they also have their Comments by Celebs podcast, which does like really amazing breakdowns of celebrity news. And, the Jordan Woods scandal last year sort of made that podcast, appointment listening. When stuff was popping up every day in that scandal, they were breaking it down, and that sort of helped their podcast grow a lot. So I talked to them all about growing their brand, growing Comments by Celebs, how the podcast allows them to sort of like, share their actual opinions on things. And I also talked to them about the fact that like, they don't put their face on the Comments by Celebs brand, right? Like they are the faces behind the brand. They aren't the faces of the brand. And I think that's very, I respect them a lot for that. They could easily just like put Julie Kramer and Emma Diamond front facing all the time. But no, like they don't want to be famous. They don't want to be the people whose comments are being documented by the account. They want to be the people who are curating and being the experts on it. And I find that really, really awesome. And that they've stuck to their guns on that. Because it'd be very easy for them to reverse that stance of theirs. And that's why if you're watching this podcast episode, we're not showing their faces. They don't do video interviews. And I just love that about them. And they also, they recently launched a bunch of different like offshoot accounts, Comments by Athletes, Comments by Bravo, Overheard Celebs, which I'll link up with Overheard LA. And they're just really awesome. And it was a really fun interview to do. And I got their thoughts on sort of like the state of the Kardashians now that their show is ending. And since we recorded the interview, Hulu announced a major deal with the Kardashians. So keep that top of mind if you listen to that portion of the interview. But I still think that what they said is very valid, and their takes are very kind of apt on sort of where the family goes from here. But anyway, keep listening for my full interview with Julie Kramer and Emma Diamond, the faces behind Comments by Celebs. And make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to We Should Talk on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. It's greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys, and enjoy the interview. Okay, so we're here with Julie Kramer and Emma Diamond, the girls behind Comments by Celebs. How are you guys today?
We're good. How are you? Thank you for having us.
Of course. We were just talking, but I started following you guys pretty early on. You started the account in 2017, and I don't even know if you guys were at the K yet. I don't know if you were at 10K yet when I started following you guys. And it makes me so happy to just like think about all the success that you guys have achieved since then. It's been 3.5 years since you started Comments by Celebs on Instagram. And I'm curious to sort of like, do you guys ever get moments where you can reflect back and be like, oh my God, like we have grown this really impressive, amazing brand in a pretty short amount of time?
Well, just now, because I didn't realize how long it had been.
Yeah. I mean, I think every day, like people always ask us, oh, are you used to it by now? And we're like, no, like 0%. Every single day we're like, this is crazy. It's just so exciting. And I really do think we have that moment like multiple times a week where we'll be like to each other, how did this happen? It was such an accident, and it was a beautiful accident, but it really wasn't purposeful. And
it's also just like, I mean, if you think about it, it's like your job is to grow this brand, which just involves you tracking celebrity social media activity and keeping up with celebrity news. And like, that is the dream, right? I mean, like that's for people like us that like are really into celebrity and pop culture. It's like, I'm getting paid to do this. Like, hello.
I can't believe it. It is. It's like literally the dream.
Yeah, that's what we always say. We would be doing this anyway. That's the thing. This really, honestly, maybe a little bit less, maybe we wouldn't be screenshotting all of the comments, but we would be just as in tune. So the fact that we get to do it as our career, it hasn't set in yet. And to be honest with you, I don't know if it will.
Right. Totally. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. And I'd love for you to just kind of take me a little bit back, because I'm familiar with your story. You guys met at Syracuse University. You bonded over the Kardashians, and you sort of also at the same time sort of capitalized on this change in the Instagram algorithm that highlighted the top comments. Before that, comments were just kind of like by whenever people were commenting them in chronological order. But take me back to that point. I want you guys to take from there and just tell me sort of like what has happened in the past 3 years since that point. Because a lot has happened, and you've grown this page hugely, and there's so many offshoots and things. So I want you guys to take it away and just kind of tell us about how you grew it.
Well, thank you. Yeah. After we had initially started it, once we really decided, it was a secret for the first almost a year. We did not tell anyone. We wanted proof of concept. So Julie was still at Syracuse at the time and I wasn't. So she was living in a sorority house with a bunch of girls and she couldn't tell them. So she'd go to the bathroom on the first floor and like call me really quick, or that's how we would have our conferences because nobody could know. And we have a lot of the same friends. So there was that whole thing for the first year. And I really do think the first year was just kind of like proving to ourselves and just getting an initial proof of concept, like there's something here.
Totally.
So it was pretty quiet. I mean, in the beginning, it was a pretty slow growth. It wasn't like this crazy thing. The first year we did, I think from April to February, it was 80,000, and which is great. But I mean, it's not like it was, a million overnight.
Right.
We were
Totally.
so happy about that. And then it was really, I think the turning point for us was February 2018 when Kelly Ripa talked about it for the first time on the show. And we saw like an 100,000 follower spike. And then from there, it just kept happening. And Julie graduated when, in the summer, we were approached to start a podcast. And I really think like summer 2018 is probably when it really started to rev up. But, now that Julie graduated, now that I put off grad school, like really this is our full-time thing. And I think once we kind of internalize we're doing this is no longer a side thing, that's when it started to get really exciting.
Totally. And Julie, for you, I mean, I think back to senior year of college when it's sort of like right before you're about to graduate, it's like, do I have a job? Do I not have a job? Do I have a plan? Do I not have a plan? And for you to just sort of embrace this sort of like unknown kind of once you graduated, like what was that like for you to sort of like mentally accept that?
I have to be honest. I don't really remember it because I think the decision to put off grad school and to just do it was so like seamless. It wasn't like you would imagine it one of those things where we would be talking and discussing every day.
Yeah.
And like, it really wasn't like that. I think one day we just looked at each other and I was like, so you're not going back to grad school, right? And she was like, yeah, you're not going at all, right? And I was like, yeah, I guess we're doing this. Like that was as easy as it was, I think. It makes a lot of sense that it went down like that.
And like, obviously I think there's a lot of intrigue into like, okay, how were you guys tracking things back then? How are you tracking things now? What's been the evolution of that? Because obviously for a while it was just you two. I know that you guys have taken a couple or at least one other person under your wing to help you out, but what's been the evolution of that in terms of just like staying on top of it all? Because there's a lot to stay on top of, obviously.
Yeah. I mean, I will say in the very beginning, it was much more labor intensive in terms of the actual comment finding than it is now, because in the beginning, they didn't all go to the top. It was only if you happened to catch it at the bottom. So that was a lot of scrolling. Whereas now, if you go to a post, you can see them all. I think probably the biggest change though, in terms of feasibility is that as we've grown our audience, we've really just been able to form this community of people that are really invested and really care. So we have a lot of user submitted content, some stuff that we would have seen, but others that maybe we didn't. Maybe there's a random meme page with 120 followers that somebody happens to follow because they like Ariana Grande. So definitely relying on our followers in a way has been huge and like an amazing blessing and something we are very much grateful for.
Mm-hmm. And obviously another part of this is sort of cultivating relationships, right? I mean, that's part of how we got connected, is that you started reaching out to reporters and writers and people who were in the pop culture space to be like, oh, hey, like we saw this, like this is actually newsworthy, like you should maybe write about this. And also with the celebrities themselves. I know you guys have cultivated relationships with certain people. But at the same time, I think that gets back to you sort of like, you guys remain fairly impartial on your account, right? I feel like in terms of like what your captions are and sort of the way you present the comments, it's sort of like you let the comments speak for themselves. And I'm curious, like, is it ever hard to remain impartial in that way? Like, because you obviously have your own opinions that you share on your podcast a lot, but I feel like the page itself is fairly in the middle?
I'll let Julie answer that one, but I just want to tell everybody listening that Julie and I did our first and one of maybe 5 speaking engagements we've ever done at WeWork. I don't even know when this was. It was definitely over a year ago.
Yeah.
And Gibson was in the audience, and when it was the Q&A, he raised his hand and he said who he was, almost as if to, like, I don't think you really expected that we were going to know. And I was like, of course. Are you kidding me? First off, I live and die for your Twitter. Second of all, you've been with us since the beginning. And so I just want everybody to understand like how much you've been supportive of us from such a long time. And we really appreciate it. And I just love being here. And I want everybody to understand that, because if they don't know,
Thank
that's
you.
Like, he was literally first row in the audience.
It's fun to be supportive of each other, I think,
Yeah.
Scratch your back, I'll scratch yours. Yeah.
Of course.
But Julie, what the impartial thing about us for the account, what are your thoughts on that?
It was definitely a conscious decision that we made really early on. And I don't think that we found it to be overly difficult, because I think that even on the podcast when we talk about things, we definitely are opinionated, but it's fairly neutral. And even when it's like goes the other way, it's presented in a very fair way, I think. So I think that the main thing that we did was we were just like, the comments will speak for themselves. If it's something a little bit shady that doesn't cross the line, then there's no reason for us to pile on. If it's something that's really crosses the line and makes a celebrity look bad, then there was no reason for us to post it in the first place. And that was definitely a huge part of why we were able to create like so many relationships through the account, because people wanted to get posted. It didn't feel like a gotcha thing. Like they just were able to comment something and be seen as funny, or confirm something on their own without having to go through a publicist. So I think that our account made things easier for them instead of being something that they wanted to avoid.
Definitely. Is there an example of a comment that like you actively chose not to post on your account?
Yeah, there's a bunch. You want to say them?
I don't even remember it specifically, but it had something to do with Apple Martin, Gwyneth's daughter. It wasn't anything bad, but it was just the type of thing where, there was no reason to. It was kind of like, I didn't know how that was going to fare. And if it involves the kids, we try to ask permission first. But there's always things. Sometimes things just get really nasty, and we know, like, for example, this happens a lot with Kate Beckinsale, and it happens a lot it used to happen with Emily Ratajkowski a little bit, I think, where there would be a clapback or there would be something like that, and we purposely didn't post it, and then the next day it was in every publication, and we're like, so we missed it. That's okay. We didn't want that on our page because it was just people were so mean. And so it's like, is the clapback worth putting that message out there in the first place? I don't know. It's something we weigh.
Mm-hmm.
I would say also most recently there was Demi Lovato's ex-fiance had commented that thing on her photo about her talking about him at the PCAs and using him for clout. And we were like, everyone else is going to post this. There's no reason for us to give him that platform or attention. Like, there's something so off with him. So that was also like a really conscious decision where it was like, we don't necessarily care about the person that we're not posting. We're not trying to save them from anything, but we just don't feel the responsibility to kind of step in and give them the platform.
Yeah. And in some ways it's sort of like just imagining what the comment section of that would look like, and just to like how intense people are. And I think that was a wise decision to not include that one. But I also think it kind of gets into like you just said, everyone was going to cover it anyway. And I think that 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago, when you first started this account, like entertainment news outlets weren't really covering a celebrity commenting on another person's post as news, right? And I think that, and I'm going to give you guys credit for this, but I feel like a lot of people sort of like kind of jumped on what you guys were doing, and they would cover, Comments by Celebs flag that like X person comments on this post, but now people are sort of like doing it themselves. And I'm curious, like, you guys are still the best in the business at this, but like, what do you see that other people are sort of taking after what you guys almost like kind of trailblaze and spearheaded?
Well, thank you. Yeah, definitely. Because I think as it's evolved, comments are now headlines. They didn't used to be, like you said, especially in the beginning, it was a lot more humor focused. Yeah. And then it became almost like a very slow evolution. But yes, the thing is though, and this is not like I don't mean to say this in like a we do it better way at all. I really just think it depends on your audience. But a lot of times what you'll see is entertainment platforms will post on their page like, so-and-so clapped back, click the link in bio. And it's like, that's great, but why would somebody go to the link in bio when they can just get it on the page? So I often find that happens a lot. But like we always say, we don't own the comment section. People can do whatever they want. There are times when we'll be reading an article And instead of just embedding our post, which is so simple, they will explain the interaction. And it's like, if I'm the reader, wouldn't you rather just see it in visually? You know, that's
100%.
I would get frustrated.
Oh, I noticed that too. It's also just like, you guys were clearly the first to break a certain comment or a news, and it's like, just give the credit where credit's due. You know, it's really not that hard. Everyone's aggregating each other anyway, so it's sort of like, come on. And you know, obviously you mentioned that sort of like a year into it, the podcast came about, right? And I feel like, and Julia, you said that you guys you're able to sort of air out your opinions. You don't get too sort of like divisive, but I still think it is this amazing avenue for you guys to like just expand upon your thoughts on things. And especially because you guys kind of famously, at least for me, like don't put your face on the account. Like you don't post about yourselves. Do you feel like that is sort of just like your one outlet to really be yourselves in this brand that you've created?
I do, Julie. Do you?
Oh yeah, definitely. There are a lot of times where something will happen and I will be like, so not like bad anxious, like excited anxious, waiting to be able to talk about the podcast. Like most recently, the Charli D'Amelio and Dixie D'Amelio situation where I was texting Emma like literally every day for 5 days being like, I cannot wait to talk about this on the podcast just because I needed to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that gets back. And I remember Jordan Gate, I feel like was a huge, almost breakthrough moment for you, for your podcast, especially because to me, like that was appointment listening when that was happening. You guys did several emergency episodes around the Jordan Woods and Tristan Thompson, Khloe cheating scandal, because things were popping up almost every single day in terms of like tweets or comments or just like cryptic posts. When you think back to that moment, am I characterizing that correctly as sort of like a breakthrough moment for the podcast and you guys kind of being able to share your thoughts on things?
Absolutely. I can't stress how correct that is. Yes. I mean, I remember us emailing our producer at whatever time of night being like, I'm sorry, but we have to come in. We have to do this. And then all of a sudden the podcast started, it was at like number 9 overall, you know, not just in society culture. And this was very new for us. You know, this was 2018 or 20, I guess it was 2019.
Yeah, early 2019. Yeah.
Early 2019. Yeah. So it was crazy. And then I think what was so exciting is that now when something like that happens, for example, when the Kardashians announced that they're ending the show, I think personally what's so like still hard to wrap our heads around and very kind of exciting is when people will message us like, oh my God, I need an episode to come out. I want to hear what you guys have to think. And we're like, you guys care? This is crazy.
I was just going to say also, if you remember the live one that you came to was that same time. So the live show was happening around Jordan Gate. And I remember after we were like, okay, do you want to open up to Q&A? And everyone was like, we have to talk about Jordan. And it was just like all of us sitting there going back and forth with the audience talking about the Jordan situation.
Well, I think that's also what's so special about the podcast. And it does feel like a couple of friends just talking about pop culture and sharing their thoughts on what's going on in celebrity. And that's obviously literally what it is. You guys are friends who are talking about pop culture. But like, I feel like the listener also feels in on that conversation, even though they can't like obviously get feedback. But have you gotten that feedback from your followers and your fans, which is like, they feel connected to you guys in a way that it just feels like talking to their friends?
Yeah, we have. And I get it because we talk about the podcast audience as if they're a person. Like we'll be like, oh my God, we have to tell them. Like Julie and I will have this and we don't know these people necessarily personally, but I so get that. And I actually think it's even maybe the best compliment to receive because I personally, although I felt 100% confident in the decision to not show our faces and to keep our personal accounts private, I knew for a fact that it was stunting our growth in terms of a podcast audience because people like to feel connected to a person. And so audio is intimate and I think people feel connected, but I know that it's not the type of audience we would have if we were out there constantly promoting ourselves. So it's even a better feeling knowing that they feel that without knowing us, quote, as well as they maybe could in another way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I'd love for you guys to just sort of like say why you decided that. Why did you decide to not put your faces on things? Because there must have been a temptation at some point. I mean, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, but like when you're growing and growing, like you just said, people want to see that face sometimes. And I think it's really cool that you guys stuck to your guns and you were just like, nope, like this is what we want. This is what we decided. But can you just like elaborate on that decision for people listening?
Yeah, I'll let Julie do it. But let me just say there was zero temptation. Like when like less than zero, it's so much our worst nightmare that the fact that both of us were on the same page was the biggest blessing. But I'll let Julie.
I love that.
So yeah, there was definitely no temptation in the beginning. A lot of it, I think, had to do with the fact that we kept the account anonymous, like even just from our name. So there was definitely no decision in the beginning that we were going to be like, okay, let's make this about us. And then I think as it grew, we just really liked being the business women behind the account. The account spoke for itself. There was never a question of what are the reasons that we're in this for. It was just like, this is our account. We're staying behind the scenes. It's not about us. And then I think as we grew and grew and we saw, other influencers and other celebrities kind of starting to grow and the effects of fame on them, every single time that happened, we were like so confident in our decision to stay behind the scenes. And yeah, there was definitely, I know personally, I never had a moment where I was like, should we just show, like never. I've always been so happy that we didn't do that.
Yeah. Well, good for you guys. I really appreciate that, because I feel like there's so much these days of people just wanting to like get themselves ahead and get sort of like put their face on anything. And I think for you guys to have this huge platform and really kind of, again, stick to your original decision and what you really want to do and not be pressured to put your faces out there, I think is really kind of commendable. So.
Oh, thank you. Fame is scary. It's definitely not something we at all are envious of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And switching gears a little bit, I think we talked a little bit about sort of like keeping up with the comments and things like that. But another sort of version of keeping up is just sort of keeping up with the times. It's like keeping up with the ever revolving door of like relevant celebrities and new names that pop up. And like when hit shows on Netflix pop up and then all of a sudden you have to care about everyone on that show. Like, how do you guys address that? And are you guys also having to like watch all the new hit shows all the time to keep up sort of with who these personalities are as well?
So for me, in probably the most hypocritical thing ever, I'm not a TV watcher at all. I'm really just reality television. And so recently I've realized this is not going to cut it. I have to. How is Zendaya going to win the Emmy? Everybody's talking about her. I just love her because of who she is, and I didn't watch Euphoria. There's no way. So I've started to get more involved, and 100% to Julie's credit, she pretty much outlines exactly what she thinks I should watch. And yeah, I found that personally for me, and I think our answers would be different, but when Isabel and I were doing the Bravo show, I had taken a little bit of a break from Bravo. So I hadn't been watching Potomac. I was a little behind on Beverly Hills. So I was binging like a crazy amount just because how so many of these things, it's a new season, but they draw so much from the past. So
yes.
For the first time in my life, I was like, I can't believe my homework is to sit down and go through a PowerPoint of each Potomac housewife. And I'm watching all these reunions, and I'm happy that I had to do it. But yeah, definitely there's that pressure. Not in a bad way, but it's there.
What about for you, Julie, the TV watcher?
Yeah, I watch everything. So my favorite thing is when I get to combine my love of TV and our account. And I think that's something that we both really enjoy a lot, is when there's something that is just being spoken about widely across the internet. Our ability to either post a comment that pertains to that or post a tweet that's, everyone's going to get because everyone's watching the same thing or talking about the same thing. And there's this something we talk about a lot is the sense of like internet camaraderie when something happens.
Yes.
Which was kind of the biggest part of the Jordan situation, was that everyone was talking about the same thing. So not only was it this crazy situation, but, Gwyneth Paltrow's commenting on memes asking for it to be explained. And the internet, it's just tweet after tweet after tweet. So there's a lot of fun in posting something that, everyone's talking about. And even some people are like, they feel kind of alone in their opinion, or they feel like they're the only ones doing it. And then all of a sudden they see this tweet posted with 1 million comments under it. And they're like, oh my God, we are all talking about the exact same thing right now.
Yeah. It's fun. It's fun. And it's fun that you guys kind of get to spur that dialogue along, which is you got to keep it going, which is awesome. I love that.
Yeah.
And obviously, and with that, you guys have expanded the page into other pages. So like Comments by Bravo, which has its own podcast episode now on your podcast, like, that's a huge page. It has over 100,000 followers. You have Comments by Athletes and Comments by Influencers and Bachelor. Are those just kind of ways for you to just kind of further tap into these more niche audiences and kind of at least and give them more of what they wanted?
Definitely. It was a natural progression. And I honestly think the reason we started it the first time was because people have a very interesting definition of what they classify as a celebrity. And so, yeah, if you're a Bravo watcher, what Bethany has to say is really important, but then you take yourself out of that world and it's not as, people maybe aren't as interested if they are not previous fans.
It's not as universal.
Exactly. It's not as universal. And so we kind of decided like there's so much content to be had, but we're being stunted by not being able to post it on the main page. So let's just create this separate fandom because they already are in. They want to see it all. They're not going to get annoyed by too much Bravo content. There's no way. That's what they love. So I think it actually, one, gave us a little bit of freedom.
Yeah.
And then, we started Overheard Celebs just recently, about a month and a half ago, with Overheard LA team. And personally for me, I think that was maybe our most exciting, venture on Instagram, because we've been doing just comments for so long, which I love, but it was cool to have a little bit more of like a long form type situation. So I guess the idea of other accounts that aren't only comments excite me. I don't know what that would be yet, but it's something we're constantly talking about.
Mm-hmm. Talk to me about the Overheard account, because I saw that and I follow it and I love it because most of the stories are pretty positive and like feel good, at least, or like make you laugh a little bit. What's the idea behind that account? Because that's a pretty great link up to link these two brands together.
Yeah, I mean, Jesse, who's the founder of Overheard, we've just been friendly with him for a little while now, and him and I would just talk on the phone all the time, and we think we want to do something together. What is it? And we hung up one night, and I remembered that a couple of months earlier, we were talking about a potential podcast, and Julie had made this outline of just like celebrity interactions. And I was like, that's it. And so I called Julie and Isma, and I was like, is this a good idea or am I crazy? They're like, no, that's it. And so we called the team and it just happened. So for anybody who doesn't know, basically we just post user submitted stories of their interactions with celebrities. Nothing really salacious. It's not like the type of gossip you're going to get on Blinds. It's just more heartwarming, funny, unique. It's not groundbreaking, but it's just the type of thing where if you're having a bad day, maybe reading one of the stories will put a smile on your face for a couple of minutes. And so I think it was exciting just in general, the response. But then when celebrities started commenting on the post to confirm it, like
it's so meta.
Honest to you, and thank God we were recording our podcast when this happened, when Matthew McConaughey, who is not the most active Instagram user and follows like 100 or something people, commented on the post confirming the story. We were recording the Kardashian episode and Julie said to me, and I was like, oh my God. And it's just been this crazy meta world because then we can post that on CBC and we're just like, what the f- is happening right now?
The ultimate cross promo. It really is.
And that was always the dream that we had when we started the account, because we were like, hopefully we'll get to the point where celebrities will start to follow in the comment. But it was always like an eventually thing. And then the first couple of posts, and it started to happen, we were like, this is insane. When Matthew McConaughey commented, we were recording, like Emma said, we kept that in, the conversation of us posting in, because we were like, this has to be the coolest behind the scenes ever, because like we're freaking out about it.
I love it. And so obviously you've linked up with the Overheard team for that account, and you have Isabel who does a lot of your Bravo stuff, correct? Like, what is it? Just you? Is that the full extent of your team, or do you have other people that help you out?
It's just the three of us, and then we hired somebody part-time to run the Comments by Athletes account, just because we have no idea.
It's a different world.
It's a different world, and we're actively looking for someone for Bachelor to kind of do a test run, because Bachelor's not really our world, and I know that would be huge if we really did it right, but it's just taken a little bit of a backseat. So, yeah, I mean, it is just the three of us. And
oh my gosh, it's amazing. So I feel like obviously you guys were you kind of bonded over Keeping Up with the Kardashians, and you've recapped the show all the time now on your podcast, and the Kardashians have been a big part of the page. We talked about Jordan Gate, but the show is coming to an end. And I'm curious, sort of like, you've gotten to a point where people are looking for your commentary on this huge family who has huge influence on all of pop culture. Where do you stand on the show ending, sort of now that we've had a couple months to sort of digest that? And like, what do you think the future looks like for the Kardashians? Like, I'm curious what your theories are, what your sort of current opinions are on that.
You want to take this one first, Julie?
Yeah. So, I think the beauty of the Kardashians is that there will always, always, always be something. I think we both felt like the show coming to an end was something that we were expecting. Not necessarily that it was going to be one more season and out, but we knew that it was kind of approaching that time. And I think so much of that also has to do with just linear television and where certain programs live and the amount of money in streaming. So I think we feel like there is still the possibility that the show will come back just in a different way, which is something that we can obviously work with. But, the beauty of the Kardashians is that even if they don't live on any platform, they're everywhere. So we'll still have every, drama that they get into and every relationship that they have and every major news story that involves them, which is, great. The thing that we were saying is what we'll miss out on is the behind the scenes of those things. So our favorite thing was a major news story breaks about them. Obviously, when we watch the episode, it's not like it's breaking to us in that moment, but we get to see what actually happened behind the scenes on their end, which is something that I think that we'll miss the most out of anything.
Yeah. And I think if you take a recent episode of the show, which is actually based on an Instagram comment, which is when Kendall and Kylie were in their fight, and Kylie posted a picture of them. Kendall comments, aren't we fighting? And that's literally like, that made headlines in the moment, but we had no idea why they were fighting. And to me, like in the moment, I kind of thought that it was like, kind of just like in jest, you know what I mean? But then we see on the show months later that like, no, like they seriously fought and had like a physical altercation in a car. Like that's, to me, like I agree, like we're going to miss those explanations almost, even though they are still sort of like produced, like it's still more of an explanation of the moment.
100%. Yeah.
Oh yeah. We were sure when we posted that it was a joke. In no way did I think that it was going to allude to this, huge fight. Oh, that honestly, when we were watching that episode, we were like, could you just imagine if they just put over Comments By Celebs on the screen? Like I knew it wasn't going to happen, but a little part of me was hoping.
Yes, I mean they should have thrown you a bone, because that would have been just like life altering, I feel.
I don't know if we would have recovered from that.
And finally, like, I think during 2020 has obviously been a doozy of a year in a lot of different ways. And I think something that I've read a lot of articles about is just sort of like the ways in which the pandemic has sort of affected how we think about celebrity and how we think about the Kardashians and how we think about sort of like a celebrity's role in society. I think there are a lot of articles that have sort of like preemptively said like, oh, like celebrity's dead. Like we're no longer like listening to like the influencer, like, we're not listening to them. And I think it's a little bit early to say that personally, but I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are just sort of on sort of like the breaking down of the celebrity like wall and how that's been sort of accelerated this year or not. Because, a lot of people think that, and I don't know if that's something that you share.
Yeah. I mean, I think in a certain way, even just pre-corona, the whole wall of celebrity has been almost breaking down over the years, just because we always talk about this. When we were growing up, you remember getting that People magazine? That was your glimpse into their lives. It was that and the red carpet. And when they did a sit-down interview with Barbara Walters, we weren't getting daily things. We weren't getting Instagram stories. So as social media started to kind of become more popular, the idea of celebrities being untouchable also started to just lower, because you realize they were much more of like, quote, regular people. And so that's been happening for a while. And I think in a certain way that's been really great for some people. Clearly look at the Kardashians. They've been able to grow this empire. Yeah. I think it's been really damaging for others because they don't necessarily know how to do it and they can get themselves in trouble. But in the very beginning of quarantine, the Imagine video kind of set the tone for the way people were viewing celebrities in this time. And it was a very fine line of like, yes, we're quote all in this together, but no, we're not, because you're sitting at your $10 million house and I can't put food on the table. So there's got to be an in-between here, and don't act like we are all the same.
Totally.
So I think watching them navigate this has been really interesting because, some people you can see are really struggling with a lack of relevancy. So every day there's a new IG live show or there's a new something that they have to do because they're not used to not getting this much press. So that as an idea is in general is interesting, but I don't think celebrity is dead. I think it's really presumptuous to say that. I just think that relying on them as the end all be all is definitely coming to a halt because people realize there's no way. How could they speak for my interests when they're not coming from the same place. So I think that's more what's happening, but definitely not that it's dead because people still care. I mean, look,
100%. Yeah, exactly. Julie, what about you? What do you think about the whole thing?
Yeah, I think I by no means think celebrity's dead. I think the role of celebrities is changing and evolving in the same way that, 2020 is a very different year and we're noticing so many things about like our political and social landscape changing. Celebrities are just kind of following in that same trend of what people want to see out of their celebrities and out of their influencers. And I think obviously there are a lot of celebrities that are really used to doing things in an old-fashioned way, like Emma was saying. So they're just figuring out how to adjust to that, which is of course going to take some time. But then you also have celebrities who kind of just get it. And those are the ones where you see where people love to talk about them and obsess over them and quote stan them because they feel so connected to them. So like you have your Timothée Chalamets and your Zendaya where people just feel like they innately get the culture and the landscape, and they feel so drawn to them. So I don't think it's that celebrity is dead. I just think that we're constantly redefining what's the role of celebrities in our lives are. Because even, celebrities where they are more old fashioned or you don't feel so connected to them, it's so easy to say it's dead until they do something that you want to talk about. And then all of a sudden they can't be dead if you're still talking about them, even if it's to love to hate them, they're still there. So I think that it's about redefining.
Yeah, or it's like a more legacy celebrity joins Instagram and it's like a huge cultural moment. And you're like, wait, I didn't even realize this many people cared about Michelle Pfeiffer or like, you know what I mean? It's like, there are these moments that are kind of unexpected, which kind of still surprise me.
Right. And I think for us as people who just love celebrities and celebrity culture and are maybe a little bit older than, even though we're still pretty young, but a little bit older than the new generation, that's like the TikTok Gen Z generation, we still love that older generation of celebrities where it's like they're so iconic to us. Whereas I think younger people may not necessarily get that. So it is interesting to watch those two things kind of play out.
For sure. Well, Emma and Julie, I feel like we could talk all day, but I think I'll give you some time back in your day. But thank you so much for calling in. Again, this means so much, and I loved talking to you guys. Where can people follow you? Where can people listen to you? Do your plugs.
First of all, anytime, seriously, whenever. I said this before, you've been a day one, and we're just so thankful for your support, and I loved this.
Love you.
And also, anybody who's listening that doesn't follow him on Twitter, you're missing out. What's your? It's like Gibsonoma, right?
Gibsonoma, yeah.
Yeah, it's a must.
A must.
When we do, just like as like a behind the scenes side note, we call them filler stories because we obviously want to put good content on the stories, but we also want to promote the podcast. So we don't want it to ever look like it's too much podcast promo. So we have like funny quote fillers. That's what we call them when we're trying to promote the podcast. And so when we're looking for ones, it's always like, did you check Gibson? That's one of like our first hits that we do. So
yeah, you just made my life. Okay, we're done.
No, seriously, we source story content from you.
I love it.
Yeah, so Comments by Celebs is our main account. We have Comments by Bravo, Comments by Bachelor, Athletes, Overheard Celebs most recently, and then our podcast. It's just Comments by Celebs. You can find it anywhere you find your podcasts. And Monday, big pop culture breakdown, everything that you need to know. Wednesday or Thursday, we do a Kardashian recap. So in season, we just recap the episodes. Right now we're doing old seasons. And then Friday, Isabel and I do a full Bravo breakdown.
Love it. Well, thank you guys. And we'll talk soon, I'm sure. But thank you so much for calling in again.
Of course. Thank you.
Yeah. Bye, guys. Thank you so much for listening. Please rate, review, and subscribe to We Should Talk on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Any support you can give us would be greatly appreciated. You can follow me, Gibson Johns, at Gibsonoma on Instagram and Twitter. And you can follow In The Know at In The Know on Twitter and at Watch In The Know on Instagram. We'll see you next time.